be a tatterdemalion. A tatterdemalion. Don't be one. Again, thanks for watching us tonight. Meygan is next. I'm Bill O'Reilly. Please remember the spin stops here. We're looking out for you.
Breaking tonight, mass protests erupting for a second straight evening and spreading across the country over the deaths of black men at the hands of white police officers and the question of whether race was a factor. And now President Obama's point man on this is calling for big changes to the United States justice system. Welcome to the Kelly File, everyone. I'm Megyn Kelly. All across the country tonight, we are seeing large-scale protests. Demonstrators shutting down roadways and bridges in New York, where Eric Garner was killed a few months ago by a white police officer. Boston, where we are being told thousands have now gathered near City Hall. In President Obama's hometown of Chicago, hundreds seen marching through the streets chanting, "Hands up, don't shoot," in reference to the Michael Brown case in Ferguson, Missouri. Free! I can't breathe! I can't breathe! I can't breathe! I can't breathe! Can you hear that? I can't breathe. That's a reference to what happened in Staten Island and the cries of Mr. Garner as he died at the hands of a police officer trying to make an arrest. In our nation's capital, we are hearing reports of protesters blocking traffic in busy DuPont Circle, where the chant, "I can't breathe," there is again a nod to the New York City case. News reports there also saying there have been clashes between protesters and commuters. It all comes just hours after civil rights leaders called for more federal involvement in officer-related shootings, including Al Sharpton, the controversial activist who has been working hand in hand with the White House on all of this. Listen.
The federal government must do in the 21st century what it did in the mid-20th century. Federal intervention had to come into the South to protect people's civil rights and voting rights. Federal intervention must come now and protect people from state grand juries that keep exonerating any seeking of redress on police matters. We want the Justice Department and the federal government to deal with the fact that the grand jury systems on a state level are broken and seem to lack the capacity to deal with police when you are dealing with questions of criminality and killings.
We believe, to an extent, that because of this history, these state grand juries have forfeited their right and their ability to bring about justice in the case of police misconduct cases.
The last person you heard right there joins us now. Mark Morial is CEO of the National Urban League, the nation's largest civil rights organization, which was founded in 1910. Good to see you, Mark. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Great.
All right, so let's start with this. What is the evidence that what happened to Eric Garner and what happened to Michael Brown has anything to do with race?
Well, it's surprising to me that in both of these instances, Prosecutor McCullough and the Staten Island prosecutor deviated from what most lawyers know and understand. And I am one who spent 10 years practicing law, including criminal law, deviated from standard procedure when it comes to managing a grand jury. And that is to present evidence and make a recommendation to the grand jury as to what charge.
Now for more than 20 years.
اقتحامات متكررة للأقصى تتزامن مع تضييقات على السكان الفلسطينيين هنا في القدس، أمر يشكل وصفة لتصاعد مشاعر الإحباط والغضب بين الفلسطينيين.
المرة الأولى بيدخلوا بيقتحموا المسجد الأقصى المبارك وبيدخلوا فيه نعالهم. لأول مرة نرى هذا الكم من الرصاص داخل المسجد الأقصى نفسه وليس في باحة المسجد الأقصى.
أحداث تنذر بتفجير انتفاضة قيل منذ حرق الطفل محمد أبو خضير إنها هادئة.
أهلا بكم جميعا إلى حلقة جديدة من برنامج من واشنطن. كما أرحب بضيوفي في هذه الحلقة التي نخصصها لمسألة ما إذا كان الإسلام يلتقي ليس مع الديمقراطية ولكن مع الديمقراطية الأمريكية. ضيوفي إذن هم أسامة جمال رئيس العلاقات العامة والاتصال المدني بالجمعية الإسلامية الأمريكية.
هنا هلا من كل مكان داخل الأردن أو من خارج الأردن ولا زال أكيد معنا الفنان تيمور جلال. تيمور، أول شيء بدي أقول إنه طبعا المخرج ما أعطانا ولا لقطة حتى نسرق شوي شو عم تحمل نورة.
نعم.
فأنا مش مسؤولة شو عم تفصل.
أنا ما أعرف كنت شو رسمتني، إذا ما رسمتني حلو
ما سرقنا ولا لقطة.
اترك البرنامج.
اترك البرنامج.
ما كنت متوقع تشوفني.
The cases at hand did not yield justice, and that's why I am pleased that the Department of Justice and the Attorney General are going to conduct.
I get that. You're entitled to your opinion on that and to push for an additional investigation, and that's absolutely, you're right. But to say that this is a racist situation, as Al Sharpton has suggested, as Mayor de Blasio has suggested, as many others have suggested, requires evidence.
What would it take for you to acknowledge that race is an issue? Maybe you don't want to acknowledge that race is an issue.
I'd like to know the truth. Just tell me.
Let us say this. On this issue, we have a difference of opinion. And as Americans, we have a right to have a difference of opinion.
I would like to know the evidence.
With respect to how this occurs. And I think there are just too many instances. Yeah, there's always other cases, and to some extent, whether a police officer, regardless of his color or her color, in a case where they, in fact, take advantage of a citizen, that case should be handled. Those people, if probable cause is met, should be prosecuted. And I think the outcry you see, Megan, is not operating in a vacuum. And it's not just one or two civil rights organizations. This is an organic protest. And
but where are the protests over the fact that 91% of all blacks who were murdered in 2013 were killed by other blacks, 7% were killed by whites. 91% of the murders committed against black people were by other black people.
So let me tell you about your right-wing talking points.
It's not my right-wing talking points. Those are statistics and facts.
If you want to know where the outrage is, come with me on Sunday to 100 African-American churches around the country where there's a conversation about violence, police violence, black-on-black violence.
Right.
That just may not be a part of the community that you see, where there's outrage, where there are rallies, where there are outrage and rallies.
I haven't seen the rallies like this
because you're
over
not
the black-on-black crime, which is 91% in New York City and nationally.
The protests are about the lack of accountability by the system, Megan. When black people take advantage of other black people. Prosecutions take place in many of those cases. This is about the lack of accountability. A police officer wears a uniform. They're sworn to uphold the law. They're public servants,
and they should not
be above the law.
Agreed, but when grand juries feel that a prosecution should ensue, it does, i.e. the South Carolina case. But when the grand jury doesn't feel that way and it plays out and they hear testimony like in Ferguson from 5 African-American witnesses who say the story was as the white cop said it was.
What about the Garner case?
Why do we have to say it's about race?
You saw the tape in the Garner case, Megan. Anyone's plain eyes can see.
I understand the
Anyone's plain eyes can
but
see.
I would like the evidence that was about race.
No, the issue is whether there was probable cause to bring a charge against the officer.
I got that.
That's the legal question.
I'm with you on that. That is the question.
Do you agree with me? Do you agree with me as a lawyer that the standard of probable cause was met in that case?
Let me ask you that. And I grant you, Mark, that the Garner case is far more controversial in terms of the evidence and why there was no indictment than Ferguson. That's a no-brainer.
And I think
but the racial component has yet to be established. I am wanting you to establish it for me. All I hear so far is past examples. Rodney King, that's a different case. It was a long time ago.
Megan,
I'm citing you other examples.
I've cited 5 cases to you.
And I cited 3 to you.
Okay, so is this a game of numbers?
You tell me.
I don't believe it's a
you
game
tell
of numbers.
me the evidence. They're wondering why we're seeing people in the street condemning the law enforcement, condemning this as a white versus black thing.
No one is saying that. The protesters on the street, Megan, walk down into
Mayor
New York.
de Blasio said this is about racism.
Many of these protesters are white. They are black.
Mayor de Blasio said this is about racism. The Congressional Black Caucus said this is about black lives being taken with impunity.
Let your cameras go down on the street, and what you're going to see is a mixture and a tapestry of America protesting in connection with this case. This protest, the outcry you see, is not just black people. The victims may be African American.
I'm not saying it is. It's the message that this is a white versus black thing.
Well, if you disagree with it, you're entitled to disagree with it, but let's look at the movement.
I'm not offering my personal opinion, sir. I'm asking for you to establish where race falls into this matter, but I think we've had that discussion. We're going round and round, and it's great to see you. Anyways, Mark.
Thank you.
Thanks
Have a great day.
The protest marches are getting larger and louder at this hour. We're going to track these. Plus, President Obama today weighed in on this matter again, on both the case in Ferguson and the case in New York, Staten Island. See why his latest remarks are raising a lot of questions. Plus, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio today doubling down on his claims that racism has reached a crisis point in America and is behind the situation that we saw in Staten Island. Sheriff David Clark has a very different take. He's moments away.
I have a lot of respect for the office of president. I have a lot of respect for the person that holds that office. But I'd have to question the judgment of anybody who would take advice from Al Sharpton.
Coming up tonight at 11 Eastern on the O'Reilly Factor.
We'll continue reporting on yet another police killing of a black American where the grand jury declines to indict. Coming up shortly.
Watch the O'Reilly Factor tonight at 11 Eastern, right after Hannity.
Former heavyweight boxer Brett Rather was